Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. I call this meeting to order and declare a quorum. We have 6 members present, along with our student member. At this time, I invite you to stand with us as we do the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll have approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zengmeyer. Any discussion of the agenda?
Yeah. President Williams, I move to amend the agenda to remove item number 1 from the consent agenda
Okay.
for the board certified behavioral analysts.
Okay, we have a motion to remove item 1 from this evening's consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gessford. Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we remove item number 1 from this evening's consent agenda. All those voting in favor of? Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have a discussion. Sorry.
I'd like to ask, do you know what BCBAs do?
We just had a big meeting about that 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and what do they do?
I'll tell you, they're not being successful, and when you ask them what the plan is to change how the behavior, or how the relationship looks, there is no plan. So in my head, I don't understand how we can justify continuing to spend millions of dollars on the BCBAs without having a plan to renew that relationship. If we're not doing that, then why are we going to keep on spending the same money in a way that has shown over 2 years that it's not going to work? So, quite frankly, I'm not sure what they do, because what we're told they're doing, the numbers just don't show that that's happening.
Well, before we had BCBAs, schools had to wait for someone from the central office to come and observe kids. Now the BCBAs can observe kids. They can write FBAs, which are functional behavior assessments.
I know what that is. I was a special ed teacher.
They can write, I'm explaining it to the audience.
Okay.
They can write BIPs, behavior improvement plans. And they do student observations and work with children, especially some of the most needy kids. They do actually work with children, okay? It's a lengthy process, but once started, it takes a while. In other words, some of these children have so many issues that it's not going to be resolved in one school year, but it's an ongoing process. So I've been told by people that actually work with BCBAs that if we were to pull them, we would actually be going backwards and be doing damage to our students.
So I don't understand how they're doing any good. I asked this question. I mean, I asked the question, what are we going to do so that there's not 13,500 behavioral referrals written in middle school next year? And there's no response.
But the
And so,
BCBAs
hang on.
don't work with every one of those students. The
Right.
BCBAs work with the most severe.
So again, if our numbers are getting worse, the numbers that we saw and the numbers that, the presentation we got, just in my head, they don't support the millions of dollars that we're spending on this. So I'm asking, that until we renew that relationship and show how, learn from it and evolve this position, I don't see how we could justify spending the taxpayer dollars on that. I don't see where that's an issue.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or enter the discussion? Mr. Gessler.
Just for my point of reference, how is it measurable when we see success with this type of program? Is there a measurable point to this?
President Williams?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one measurement that I would like to invite Dr. Webster forward, who has been instrumental in working through this process with our special educators and in particular our supervisor of psychologists. One measure is reduced restraints. That has been a challenge to most districts. I'll invite her forward, and since our discussion that was at the work session was focused on discipline, I'll invite Dr. Webster forward to present some of the results in terms of how this program is measured, and also would invite board members to reference the budget presentation where through a video highlight the Salem Avenue team highlighting the benefits of this initiative as well.
Well, thank you. This is, as Mrs. Murray said, this isn't a quick answer. However, I think it's important to start to note that before this district introduced BCBAs to the district, we had over 900 restraint or seclusion incidents. We are down to, last school year, we had 125 from the 2017-2018 school year. So BCBA is at its very kind of basic level. They teach our staff how to de-escalate conflict, and then at a more in-depth level, they break down how to teach behavioral skills. And so I think you asked for a specific example, Mr. Gessford, you asked for a specific example of where it's working. The work at Bester is a wonderful example of where our BCBA collaboration between Dr. Gravelin and the BCBA there have supported the engaged team to see monumental growth and support to the students at Bester and a real positive school climate that they've been able to contribute. So our BCBAs, from my perspective, as schools, as Mrs. Murray said, as schools struggle with specific students who need support with behavioral skills, as a district, we're able to send support to schools to say, we have another set of eyes with someone who has a specific skill set that our teachers just aren't trained in their regular educational preparation to break down the gap between the skills that students are missing in order to be able to engage in their classroom instruction. So they are a huge resource, and right now they've largely been focused in elementary school. So Mr. Evans, when you refer to middle school referrals, specifically our BCBAs have been focused in the elementary level in providing support to the SST, the behavioral SST process for our elementary schools, as Mrs. Murray described. As we have students who need targeted support, the teachers work through a process of Tier 1 support, and when they need additional support, we can bring the BCBA into the behavioral meeting to provide specific coaching and analysis in terms of if we have to go to the FBA BIP process that Mrs. Murray referred to, then they support that process as well.
So, again, we're spending millions of dollars on these, and, 2 years in, yes, okay, so you brought up some specific examples, but what are we doing for the system as a whole? These numbers aren't good, and I don't see where we are trying to spend this money more effectively. I mean, we have people begging us for help, and I just don't see where this is making a $1 million impact. I mean, obviously one life touched is obviously a huge deal, but there's more we can be doing. And to go and keep on spending these tax dollars the same way and expect people to just say, well, we need to be more patient, or, it takes more time, that's not good enough. We could do better for our people. And, to keep on doing the same thing is is what I'm hearing that the people don't want. And so that's why I'm asking for this, until we could go and create a better plan to see more rapid growth. I don't see how we could continue paying to do the same thing that has minimal improvement.
President Williams, if I may, I think it's it's beneficial for the board to recognize that the item at hand is a concentration of poverty grant. So once again, that is not a requirement. It's not using local dollars. It is a state-level grant tied to the blueprint. Looking at where we were 2 years ago, extreme challenges in our elementary schools. The expansion of BCBAs was an effort to do something different, to support the significant needs of our youngest learners in many cases and provide supports to those students, those families, as well as our teachers. And we received very positive feedback from our elementary schools that have that level of support from a team approach to really address some really complex issues. I think it's also worth referencing that probably every district in the United States post-pandemic have likely seen an increase in discipline and dysregulated students. And this is a different effort that is unique and something that was not in place 2 years ago in Washington County. Once again, most of these dollars are not tied to local funding, but the concentration of poverty grant.
And Mrs. Williams, if I may add to Dr. Savine's comments, that as our elementary schools are increasing, the number of COP schools are increasing, they are asking to have their own BCBA on staff because of the success we've seen with the district level BCBAs that we've added. This contract with Bester is one that they believe in the work and have seen the results of the work to the degree that they are asking to have one on their staff in their building every day. So our COP schools are consistently, this is one of their most desired additions to their team to support the day-to-day work and our day-to-day work, their day-to-day work teaching students.
Thank you, Dr.
When you say they, you're
Excuse me,
talking about the
could we-
principal?
Could we use the practice of raising our hand and be recognized before we launch into discussion?
certainly.
Thank you. And that's not directed at you, Dr. Zentmeyer. There's been a lot of back and forth, and it's good to allow individuals to have a first comment before they go back and have a second. You don't agree with that, Mr. Gesford?
I just think you're getting childish about raising hands. It sounds like you're being a bully. I mean, we're adults. We're adults here. And I think, it's time that we just say enough's enough. We can be cordial to everybody. We're friends. We all are
We
friends.
certainly are.
And to call her out.
I wasn't
Not,
calling her
yes, you
out.
did. Not acceptable, Ms. Lou.
Dr. Zentmeyer, I apologize to you if you felt I was calling you out.
I do have.
I should have made the comment earlier with the back and forth. And Mr. Gesford, I am in no way a bully. And I accept your apology for calling me such.
No.
Now, Dr. Zentmeyer, I'll let you speak, and then I'd like to make a comment.
There is a Facebook page called WC Parents, and there was a post on that explained from a teacher's point of view what BCBA means, Board Certified Behavioral Analyst, and it was so incredibly helpful to hear what teachers had to say. So I highly recommend anybody who's wondering what a BCBA actually is to go to that website. And I think her name is Dottie, but it's one of the first posts, and it's a little bit long, but it explains things that I didn't know before.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak before I? First, I'd like to thank Dr. Webster for providing examples and noting what she's hearing from the teachers in the concentration of poverty grant schools with regard to wanting more BCBAs, and that there are teachers who are in schools that are not concentration of poverty schools who are requesting to have BCBAs. I'm not certain, Mr. Evans, who you're hearing from that things aren't working, and I'd be interested in knowing what suggestions you have for improving the behavior. And I would like to go back to comments made at our last meeting where it was mentioned that BCBAs actually, according to research done and studies, that they actually make students sicker. So I'm interested in knowing the research studies that were looked at, that we can come to that conclusion that it's not worth having BCBAs in our school, because I think it's important that we do base our decision-making on sound research.
Are you talking to me?
I'm just making that statement.
So I have given my ideas to improve the behavior at the schools, and, unfortunately, there's never been discussion. My suggestions have never been discussed or taken seriously. But I will say, I do remember when we had our discussion on discipline, and the one thing I remember that doctor said that stood out to me was that the biggest thing the kids need is to be able to build relationships. And we know that no one is going to be able to build a better relationship with the kids, at least in our school systems, other than their parents, are the parapros and teachers that are with them all day long. And, instead of last week, instead of retaining the 9 elementary and middle school teachers that were in our budget from last year, we decided to cut them and keep the 9 BCB, or keep the BCBAs. I forget how many there are now. But, if we want to build relationships with the kids, then we need smaller class sizes. We don't need 30 teachers or 30 kids in a kindergarten class with no parapro or whatever, and you have kids who are too young to be identified as having special needs, so they can't get their support. And it's if you really want to help the behavior, you really want to build the relationships for the kids, then we need more teachers in the classroom. Instead, we cut that.
Mr. Evans, do you not understand that the BCBAs assess behaviors and help develop plans that would assist the teachers and the paraprofessionals in developing those relationships and addressing those behaviors in appropriate ways?
That's what we're told they're supposed to do. I don't see in the numbers how that shows, though.
President Williams?
Yes, sir.
If I may, just to help all board members regarding this issue and the request for Bester, recognizing that 2 years ago we had, I believe, 2 BCBAs countywide, and there was an effort, and this board collectively approved mid-year an expansion of these services, recognizing that, in particular, looking at Bester Elementary. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, we noticed the most significant challenges in many cases were with our youngest children, kindergartners, first graders, second graders. While there were challenges at all levels, the elementary level was a point of focus to provide support. We did expand BCBAs, not to the point where every school had a BCBA. In this case, Bester shared their current BCBA in this past year with multiple schools. So in many cases, once a day or once a week, or sometimes where needed, there was a greater presence from the BCBAs. But most importantly, in this case with Bester, they saw a 41% reduction in referrals. Based on that, and looking at the available concentration of poverty dollars, the principal working with the school team saw value in having one sole BCBA assigned to their school for the upcoming school year, and to utilize the concentration of poverty dollars to support that. Hopefully that provides some additional clarity and specific results at Bester Elementary in terms of, 41% reduction in disciplinary referrals is pretty significant.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. We're voting on the amendment, which is to remove item 1 from this evening's consent agenda. All those in favor of removing item 1, please raise your hand. 2. Those opposed? 3. Abstaining? 1. And noted that the student member is voting with those opposed. And the motion fails for lack of 4 votes. Now we'll move on.
We have to approve the agenda.
Yes. We are going to now vote, and first of all, we'll discuss the agenda. Is there any discussion of the agenda? Okay, then we're voting on the approval of this evening's agenda as printed. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. In the affirmative. Those opposed? 2. Student member concurs with those voting in the affirmative. Motion carries. We have an approved agenda. Thank you. Okay, we'll move now to approval of this evening's, or not this evening's minutes, but a list of minutes from previous meetings.
Mrs. Williams, I have 6 motions. The first one is the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, May 21st, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. All those in favor of approval? Okay, we have 6 in the affirmative. Motion carries.
My second motion is for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, May 21st, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. Any discussion of the business meeting minutes, any additions or corrections? Business meeting minutes of May 21st, 2024. All those voting in the affirmative? Okay, we have a unanimous vote, and student member concurs.
The third motion will be for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, June 4th, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. All those in favor of approval of the closed session minutes dated June 4th, 2024? Okay, we have 5 votes. You're abstaining. Okay, those closed session minutes are approved.
Our fourth motion will be for the approval of the closed session open portion minutes dated Tuesday, June 4th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. All those voting in the affirmative to approve the closed session open portion for June 4th, 2024, please raise your hand. Okay, 5 and another abstention. Student member is also abstaining. Correct?
Motion number 5 is for the approval of the work session minutes dated Tuesday, June 4th, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. All those voting in the affirmative, please raise your hand. Okay. Did you raise your hand?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, motion carries for that set of minutes.
And for the final motion, motion number 6, the approval of the special business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, June 11th, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the special meeting? All those in favor of approval? Okay, we have 6 affirmative. Student member concurs, so all minutes have been approved. Thank you. At this time, we'll move to the superintendent's report, and we will continue after new business. So, Dr. Servine.
Thank you, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, members of the board. I'm honored to introduce some of our newest teachers at Washington County Public Schools. They've successfully completed the Maryland Accelerates program, a valuable partnership with Frostburg State University. Mrs. Joni Burkhart, our supervisor of professional learning, and along with Aaron Orth, one of our mentor teachers will now introduce these educators and their mentors who have set them up for much success.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Servine. The Maryland Accelerates program provided aspiring teachers the opportunity to earn an accelerated Master's of Arts in Teaching degree, along with an innovative year-long teacher residency in partnership with Frostburg State University. All scholarship recipients completed an accelerated 13-month program, worked with an experienced Washington County Public School teacher, and were hired to teach for the 2024-25 school year in Washington County. Last week, we attended an executive meeting with Frostburg and Washington County Public Schools. Misty Raines shared a compelling story of what the Maryland Accelerates program means to her. We would like her to share her story with you now. Misty.
Thank you, Joni. The great Jerry West said it best. I was a dreamer. My family didn't have much, but we had a clear view of the Appalachian Mountains. And I'd sit alone on our front porch and wonder, if I ever make it to the top of that mountain, what will I see on the other side? Well, I did make it to the other side, and my dreams have come true. I am truly honored and privileged to be standing here today, sharing my experience with Maryland Accelerates and my residency with Washington County Public Schools. I am a person who is rarely short on words, but when asked to share, I had to pause a moment and really consider how to best convey my deep appreciation for the Maryland Accelerates program and the support of Washington County Public Schools. I grew up very different than most people in this room. I grew up in the heart of Appalachia. I don't mean the part of Appalachia we have in Western Maryland. I mean deep Appalachia, near the coal fields of West Virginia, near the poor towns of Kentucky. I grew up in what we refer to as God's country in southwestern Virginia. The Appalachia I was raised in is a cross somewhere between Hillbilly Elegy and the Beverly Hillbillies. And when you think of people hearing banjos in reference to Appalachia, those banjos probably came from my porch. For those of you who aren't familiar with these premises, it means I basically grew up in a poverty-stricken area where opportunity was very limited. To this day, in 2024, there is barely cell service and no Wi-Fi. Even worse, because of the rural population, educational opportunities are vastly limited. My grandmother, who is still alive and 91 years old, only had a 5th grade education. She worked in a sewing factory for more than 40 years. My parents both graduated high school. My mom was valedictorian of her high school class, but had to drop out of college because she was sewing in a sewing factory at night and trying to make ends meet and couldn't balance school and work. My dad worked at Island Creek No. 4 coal mine in one of the deepest shaft coal mines in America. I was primed to be a statistic. For my high school graduating class, only 5 of us had the privilege to pursue a 4-year degree. But my teachers and my parents poured into me and invested in me and my siblings, and I'm a proud first-generation college graduate, and I'm even prouder that my brother, sister, and I all have master's degrees, and we're all teachers. It could have been so different for me. As a child, the message that was conveyed to me by my mom was to get your education. It is the one thing no one can take from you. You can lose your laptop, your bank card, your cell phone, or your home. It can all be gone in an instant, but your education is the one thing that no one can take away. I don't listen to my mom a lot, but for some reason that message stuck. And because of my master's degree, I can now pour that same message and instill the importance of education into my own students. For the past 15 years, I have proudly served Western Maryland as a social worker for children and youth in foster care. And for the past 6 years, I've also served as a social worker in Ukraine, placing orphans and families. After COVID, the world of social work changed. And 2 years ago, the war in Ukraine became so dangerous, my work there had to stop. And I knew I needed a change. Higher education was not part of my plan. The time and the expense were not overly conducive to pursuing my master's degree. However, the Maryland Accelerates program is truly something special. It's a program I'm proud to be a part of. Frostburg State and WCPS's time, investment, and dedication to ensure our success is incomparable to anything I've experienced. My experience as a WCP resident was beyond anything that I could hope for. During my Accelerates interview with Joni Burkhardt and Tim Haynes, they asked what I wanted from the program, and I shared that I was completely open to any experience, but I wanted a strong mentor who could set a strong example of the teacher I needed to become, and WCPS delivered. I spent my residency at Williamsport Elementary in the 4th grade with not one, but 2 mentors, Mrs. Kim Rochelle and Mrs. Kelly Miller-Sechrest. I even gained an extra mentor in Mrs. Stacy Hood. The 3 of them have been an endless cheerleader in my success. Their support, their guidance, their encouragement have been invaluable to me. They taught me things that books cannot teach that can only be taught in real life. I've learned about positive behavior management, interpreting curriculum, and encouraging students. I've learned the importance of a strong school leadership thanks to Ms. Rhonda Smith and Mr. Austin Gray, and I've come to appreciate the value of a great school culture. At Williamsport Elementary, we never stop learning, and I'm excited that this fall I'll be teaching kindergarten at Williamsport Elementary. This program has created endless opportunities not just for me, but my entire cohort. The Maryland Excellers program has produced a small family amongst our cohort, each of us unique but all tied together for our love of learning and our goal to teach. I know this room is filled with people who have made this program possible, and I cannot possibly scratch the surface of where to begin. So I stand before you humbly thanking you for supporting this program. This program is doing life-changing things for the future of our county and our students. Whether you've approved this program to happen in Washington County, accepted Accelerate students in your school, mentored a resident, or employed me or one of my cohort members in the upcoming school year, my gratitude cannot begin to be expressed. So today, on behalf of my cohort and myself, I humbly thank each of you.
So thank you, Misty, for reminding us how important teaching and learning is in this environment. We would like to recognize all of our residents and also where they taught and who their mentors were. I'm going to have Erin step forward. She's going to call your name. As she calls your name, you will come forward and get a certificate.
First, we have Kira Barth, who worked with Johanna Mullendor at Rockland Woods Elementary. Kira has accepted a grade 2 position at Pangbourne Elementary School. Ashley Kopp, who worked with Christy Franklin at Pangbourne Elementary School. Ashley has accepted a 3rd grade position at Eastern Elementary. Misty Rains, who worked with Kelly Miller-Sechrest and Kim Rochelle at Williamsport Elementary. Misty has accepted a kindergarten position at Williamsport Elementary. And Kelsey Schilling, who worked with Nicole Gainey at Ruth Ann Monroe Primary School. Kelsey has accepted a kindergarten position at Bester Elementary. Congratulations to everyone and welcome to the WCPS community.
Continuing with our recognitions next, the Special Education Citizen Advisory Committee has a special recognition for staff this evening. And I'd like to invite Dr. Melissa Brunson, our Executive Director of Special Education. She will set the stage for our committee chair to present this year's award winners. Thank you, Dr. Brunson.
Thank you, Dr. Savine. Welcome and good evening, President Williams and members of the board. As the Director of Special Education for Washington County Public Schools, alongside, if you could just wave your hand, April Crow-Hare, who is the co-chair of the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee that we call CCAC, and Ms. Dana Peak, our WCPS 504 coordinator, we are honored to stand before you tonight. We are here to proudly celebrate and recognize outstanding professionals who have demonstrated exceptional dedication to supporting students with disabilities and their families. Throughout this year, among the various initiatives we undertook, the CCAC Awards have garnered unprecedented enthusiasm. This year's awards saw an impressive turnout. We received 425 nominations from 113 dedicated nominators, leading to 75 nominees who were willing to be considered for recognition. Through a rigorous selection process, we narrowed down these nominees to 5 exceptional winners, each representing excellence in their respective award categories. It is with great pride that we announce the recipients of these awards tonight. The Friend of Special Education of the Year award goes to Danielle Dwinells. Danielle has 16 years in education. In her current role, she serves as lead teacher at Boonesboro Elementary School. She coaches and helps teachers find strategies to transfer student learning and apply their understanding to everyday situations. She has led successful professional development sessions and encouraged differentiation as well as special education staff participation. She's had the opportunity to work in the inclusion pre-K classroom and has learned so much about young students with disabilities. She is excited to witness strategies work, and although it often takes multiple attempts to, quote, get it right, she enjoys watching students have success. Next, we have the Service Provider of the Year, and that award goes to Ms. Cheryl Morris. She could not be here tonight, but I'll read a little something about her. She's had 10 years as an occupational therapist. She holds a master's degree in OT. She chose this field of occupational therapy because of a commitment to fighting for rights and quality of life for people with disabilities. She loves working with children in their natural environment and helping the staff that works with them directly to continue the positive effects of therapy throughout the day. She is committed to helping students get rich experiences throughout their day and to also help them progress. Next, we have the Paraprofessional of the Year award goes to Marlene Powell. Marlene has 18 years in education. She actually holds a bachelor's degree in business administration, and she is currently serving at Sharpsburg Elementary School. Her daily goal is to have every student make an important contribution to the betterment of their education. Her ultimate goal is to give parents confidence in their approach and deliver peace of mind that we are doing everything possible to improve their children's lives. The next award goes to the Case Manager of the Year, and it goes to Megan Stevens. She could not be here tonight. She has 28 years in education. She has a master's in reading. She is currently a case manager at E. Russell Hicks. Her interest for working with students with disabilities happened in her life, early in her life, and many other experiences thereafter have shaped and sealed her desire for working with our special needs population. She is an outstanding case manager whose tremendous and unwavering support for students with disabilities, as well as their families and the professionals who serve them. Next, we have the Teacher of the Year. The Teacher of the Year award goes to Kimberly Kim Runfola. Kim is a special education teacher in the summer program at E. Russell Hicks Middle School. She's had 28 years in special education. She has taught all levels of special ed. She enjoys the middle school summer program because she likes to help students and employ strategies to make them successful. She chooses to work in special education because she believes no kid is expendable and they all need a champion to root for them. We thank you, ladies, for being here tonight. Stay. And we'll have a final word from Miss April Crow here, our co-chair of CCAC.
In closing, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to the board Dr. Sylvine, Dr. Webster, and all central office leadership, as well as devoted school board staff, parents, and guardians who have actively participated in the school board. Well, I did not learn to read at WCPS, just so everybody knows. That was a Montgomery County error. We'd like to thank Mr. Nichols, CCAC Chair, current CCAC Co-Chair, current former Co-Chair, Ms. Taylor, previous Secretary, Ms. Ailing, current CCAC Secretary, Ms. Hopkins, prior Secretary, for giving your time and talent to lead CCAC with support of the Department of Special Education. Your ongoing commitment and collaboration are instrumental in advancing the cause of special education in our community. Here's to a restful summer break for everyone, and we eagerly anticipate another successful and productive year ahead. Sorry to do that either.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sylvine, for that portion of your superintendent's report. Okay, we'll move now to public comment, and as is customary, I'll be reading from Board Policy KD with regard to procedures at our business meetings. Each person wishing to address the Board of Education is encouraged but not required to sign up prior to the meeting and may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except personnel or student matters which clearly identify an individual or individuals. Individuals wishing to address the board who do not sign up prior to the start of the meeting will be required to sign the log located at the speaker's table for the purpose of the meeting's minutes. Each speaker may speak for up to 5 minutes. The chairperson reserves the right to limit the number of speakers on any particular topic, provided the issue in question has been presented, and further comments would simply be repetitious. Following a speaker's presentation, the superintendent may designate a member to address the individual's concern or may ask the speaker to contact a particular department or a particular staff member at an appropriate time. At this time, our timekeeper, Mrs. Murray, will explain how timekeeping works. Mrs. Murray?
I've got my phone set for 5 minutes. When you have 30 seconds left, I'll hold this up. And when your time is up, I'll hold this up and you need to stop.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. So at this time, we'll call our first speaker, Mr. Sean Porter.
Let me know when your timer started.
Good evening, Mr. Porter.
Okay, so now that you're done jerking each other off with a bunch of trophies and participation certificates, here's the truth. You guys don't care about the disabled kids because my disabled son was deaf. You put him in with a bunch of disruptive kids, okay? Bad kids at Bester Elementary. There was no sign language interpreter, no instruction for sign language. We applied to Maryland School for the Deaf. He was accepted in December. He was supposed to be transferred in January. Dr. Annette Walters refused to sign the Board of Education form to transfer him to Maryland School for the Deaf. January, February, March, April, mid-April, I came in screaming about civil rights lawsuits and everything else, and then they immediately processed a transfer. In May, 5 months late, he was transferred to a place where they could teach him sign language, where he was around other deaf and disabled children with similar abilities as him, so that he could have a normal life and actually communicate with kids and not get into fights every single day. He came home crying from Bester Elementary School every single day he went there because he got into fights with kids who didn't understand him because he was deaf. He couldn't talk. He couldn't sign. He didn't know anything. We were doing the best that we could. But you guys left him there. No child left behind my ass. You people sit up here, waste millions of dollars, hire people with fake names like this Steve Edwards guy who's using a stage name to conduct official business, which in the state of Maryland, if he's signing contracts and legal documents, I believe is the crime of uttering, which is a felony. But you decide to leave my disabled son in with a bunch of bad kids at Bester Elementary to get his ass kicked on a daily basis because you didn't want to give up the funding you get from state, federal, and local. Okay, you didn't want to give up money, so you didn't allow him to get transferred until I came in and went psychotic in your lobby. And then you did. So everything that bitch over there said about how great you are caring about the kids is an absolute lie, Miss Williams. You should step down. You're a disgrace. You're a disgrace. I already know about you. You're a civil rights violator. You've been sued repeatedly. You're a disgrace, and you're a disgrace.
Mr. Porter.
You will not interrupt my time, ma'am. I have a First Amendment right to tell you my opinions. This is the right to redress of grievances in your face. Ms. Williams.
We appreciate your participation in the meeting, and while I encourage you to address the Board of Education,
You're stealing my time.
I will give you time.
Fuck you, you worthless fucking cunt.
Okay.
You tortured my disabled
Board,
son,
at
and
this
you will
time,
answer for it in a court of law.
I recommend that we go into closed session.
I'm not at 5 minutes, lady.
To obtain legal advice
I am
pursuant
not
to
at
the general
5 minutes, lady.
provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland.
You're silencing my free speech during my time. I signed up 2 weeks ago to talk, and you're silencing my free
May I have a motion,
speech.
please, and a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
You guys are going to silence my free speech because you don't like what I'm saying. That's viewpoint discrimination.
Mr. Porter, while I appreciate your participation,
No, you don't.
would you please refrain from using profanity
Fuck
in your
you.
comments?
First Amendment, freedom of
so
speech,
that
that's my
we
opinion of
can
your job. You're doing a
maintain
shitty job. You're an
a
awful goddamn cunt.
respectful
You're a horrible,
education
disrespectful person to that lady today.
environment.
And a week ago to Darrell Evans. I watched you condescend a fellow board member like he was a 2-year-old. You chastised him for disagreeing with you. Lady, you are everything that's wrong with the bureaucracy that's here in this building. Downsville Pike is a disgrace. The teachers are doing a great job in this county, like the people that got the awards. But people like you hamstring their abilities to teach children like mine. You're a fucking disgrace. Fuck you. Have a good day.
Our next speaker is Robin Spickler. Mrs. Spickler? Good evening.
Good evening, President Williams, Board of Education members, and student member, and Dr. Savine. My name is Robin Merchant Spickler, and I'm here to say thank you to all of you, for the many things that you have done throughout your years with us. I feel that it is due you to be welcomed and thanked for many things that you've brought forth. And I think it's in the best interest of all the students and the teachers and our community. But I want to let you know a little bit about me first. I'm born and raised from Hagerstown all my life. My whole career, I have gone through the public schools. All my siblings attended the public schools. My only daughter has attended all the public schools. Oh, sorry, all of them? No, sorry. She has attended schools from K to 12. Can you tell I'm nervous? Ha. My oldest grandson is just being promoted. He will be going to 6th grade. And my youngest grandson will begin the preschool program here in county. I have a BS in early childhood, and I have a master's in early childhood, from one from Frostburg and one from Hood. In teaching in Washington County, that's all I've ever wanted to do, and this is the only place I ever wanted to teach. I went to Frostburg and I came home to student teach so that I could be here. And I wanted to work here ever since I was a very young kid. And I was fortunate to work in the county for 44 years in the system. And I have seen many superintendents come and go. I've seen many presidents come and go. I've seen a lot of teachers come and go. I've seen a lot of programs come and go. I've seen a lot of things change. And then things come back under a different name. So I have a lot of history with a lot of the information and experience that is going through the systems. So here are some kudos to all of you. The one decision was when you put guidance counselors into the public schools. It has helped so much more than you can ever say, and it continues to do so well on a daily basis. I also want to do kudos for implementing the BCBA positions. For the first year when it came in, it had a little rough start, and some people, some of the teachers got off to a running start and has made great improvement in things. Some not so much, but anybody knows things don't change. Things don't turn around miraculously in a year. Anybody that knows anything, it takes some time, and it develops as you go through in the trust and the information. So it is taking time, and it's really good. And as I have seen and heard, it is going to make all the difference. But I can't wait to see what it plays out in the next couple years. I'm also pleased that the Board of Ed was able to maintain a salary resource pool that would enable at least a 3% for all the employees in all the groups. Your service to the students, the staff, and the community is most impressive. Your behind the scenes that people don't see is your attendance to the meetings on a daily basis, weekly basis, yearly basis. We don't see that. This is where we see you. And so kudos to that. And for all the hours you give on your committees that you serve on. And in closing, I'm so proud of Washington County Public Schools and the Board of Education, and I hope that it continues to stride for the students, the teachers, and the community as best, because I know you have the best in your heart for them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Spickler. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward? Mrs. Crowhair? Good evening.
Good evening, President. So public speaking is not my thing, so I ask everybody please be kind with me. And I never speak in the mic if you watch all my videos. So for you that have not, most of you guys know that I'm very active in special education, right? I think most of you guys are aware that I do a lot with my son Charlie, who's profoundly disabled. I also have a very robust group of friends who have disabled children throughout the county. I have, in my almost 10 years in Washington County, have developed some very strong bonds with several board members who have taken lunches with me, built relationships, met my children through the community, through their schools, and have taken an interest in those kind of subjects. And in fact, most of you guys are very well versed in my community. I personally do not have experience with BCBAs because that's not the lifestyle that my children live, right? My son is profoundly disabled. However, in my community, it is something that I see very intimately. So I can't speak about it from an educator's perspective. In fact, I can't speak about it from a parent's perspective. But what I can speak about is what I hear as a community member and as somebody who's very active in the special education community, and what I know. Now, they might not all be factual because, again, I'm not an educator. But from what I know to be historically true, most children who end up with an IEP, typically if they don't have a profound disability or an identifying condition, don't get that IEP until they're in 3rd grade. If that's a child with autism, unidentified. If that's a child with severe psychosis, unidentified. If that's a child that has another emotional disability that has been unidentified, they're going until 3rd grade, struggling with that disorder, that disability, until it can be identified. Having our BCBAs on hand allows the school staff to have those boots on the ground. It allows the relationships with parents to meet with providers in our community. It allows us as a community to meet some of our core goals, which as I understand, and please, Dr. Sylvain, correct me if I'm wrong, I know that there's not spoke, but is that mental health aspect to get the care that they need. If it's a medical condition, right? I know that in my son's school, Marshall Street, they've had some significant problems lately with medical conditions, not behavior issues, because these children cannot control it. They don't go to school wanting to have a behavior issue. It is outside of their physical ability to handle it. And I know that their principal has begged and pleaded to have a BCBA at her hands. She has to use what she has. So, in coming to you as nothing more than a parent who wouldn't deny her son the medical treatment that he needs or the educational tools that he needs. And my son, for those of you who have met him, and I think each of you on this board has met him at some point, my son's educational tools look different, right? He doesn't go to school with crayons. He goes to school with a nurse. He goes to school with feeding tubes and catheters. His educational toolbox looks much different. And for some of our early learners, their toolbox looks different as well. And ultimately, for those early learners that might have that BCBA that they might need in their toolbox, might be their first step before that IEP or preventing that IEP. Getting them that early intervention, getting them that first line of treatment before they need so. So I just ask full-heartedly as a parent that you really think about that or get to know that before making such a harsh statement or decision, because as a parent, would you deny your child something that was much needed in their line of care? Because if we change it to care, then we're looking at a different scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Crohair. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, Mrs. Mallon.
Sorry, Mrs. Mallon. That's all right. I apologize for not being here in time to sign the log. I know Debbie Chakovich has my contact information, so I've just listed my name rather than filling it completely out. Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Sobine, and members of the Board of Education. At the March 19th Board of Ed meeting, I provided comments to you about the WCPS operating budget. I spoke about your stated priorities to increase salary and compensation to attract and retain staff, to address the need for safety and security, mental health, and behavioral supports, to meet the requirements of the blueprint for Maryland's future, and to combat inflation. Since that meeting, the Board of County Commissioners has approved its operating budget that once again does not provide adequate funding, and as a result, this board has had to make some difficult decisions. As WCTA President, I am grateful that this board approved to keep the salary resource allocation to fund at least a 3% salary increase for each of the employee groups. The decision to defer savings for future post-employment benefits in order to balance the budget is a prudent one that does not harm any current retirees or employees. At your June 4 work session, in addition to considering your budget decisions, you also received a report about discipline data, and as I said at the March 19th meeting, it directly relates to this. The working environment for teachers has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. The same number of individuals who managed schools and classrooms 10 years ago are not adequate to the task in 2024. At that meeting, I recommended that you read an article published on March 13th, 2024 by the Atlantic magazine titled "End the Phone-Based Childhood Now" to further your understanding of the current state of childhood, not just in the United States but around the globe. Since that time, I have written to the Atlantic magazine to request permission to provide reprints of the article to you and others, and I have received permission to provide a limited number of printed copies. On May 17th, I sent a PDF of the article to you, and tonight I have printed copies for you as well. According to the author, Jonathan Haidt, our kids are not the same as they were, and our kids are not okay. The article goes into a number of findings and ends with clear recommendations, one of which is that parents and communities do what is necessary to delay children's independent use of smartphones until high school. I urge this board and school administration to revisit the current cell phone policy and its implementation, but more than that, to convene groups to discuss the current harm that cell phones are causing for our students, teachers, administrators, and school communities every day, and then to develop some solutions. By mid-year this past school year, one consistent concern WCTA reps brought to our rep council meetings was how cell phones were ramping up conflicts between students and in our schools. There's no doubt in my mind that the cell phone issues are at least part of the reason we've had an uptick in discipline data. I believe the harms that Haidt outlines in his article are also reasons why we need now board-certified behavior analysts, where we didn't in the past, and other supports to help students move from dysregulation to self-control. Classroom and school discipline issues relate back to our interpersonal communication and our social intelligence, and some students need help to learn and develop those skills. In addition, the political and cultural climate that has developed in the United States and Washington County since 2016 has resulted in a decline of civility that is not like anything I have ever witnessed in 37 years in education. Children see their parents, politicians, and other adults bully others, use inflammatory language, argue without reasonable logic or adherence to generally accepted facts. They see adults attack one another with innuendo, name-calling, half-truths, misinformation, and disinformation. They see jokes made at others' expenses, some that rely on rumors and innuendo. It is difficult to teach them that character counts when all around there are examples where it most certainly does not. This is also part of our rise in disciplinary issues within our schools. We are a microcosm of our community. And finally, I wanted to share with you some information that I shared with the commissioners earlier in the spring. The need for PR communication staffers in our schools and departments and in our government organizations. I think it's interesting that the commissioners have 4 staffers to manage Washington County government. Washington County has 836 employees. WCPS has 3,611 plus schools and thousands of students. and both have 4 communication staffers to do the work. Thank you for your consideration of my comments and recommendations this evening. I look forward to continued collaboration between WCTA leaders and WCPS officials so that we can all do what we can to ensure that together we do whatever is necessary to provide just, equitable school environments that celebrate diversity and include everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mallon. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and speak? Good evening, Mr. Lowen.
Good evening. My name is Ethan Lowen. Last week, when this board was readjusting its budget due to not receiving as much funding as you requested, 2 of the board members proposed removing several positions that deal with mental health and aggressive behaviors by students. Because regardless of how well-intentioned these positions are, the results have seen zero improvement. There was then a response from the board members known as the apple ballot politicians, because during election time, the teachers union prints their names on flyers that are shaped like an apple. And they hand out those flyers to let the community know that these are the politicians that have voted in the union's policies. As the 2 board members spoke, the apple ballot board members criticized them, talked over them, accused them of being inappropriate for publicly questioning policies that the apple ballot board members already voted in. Despite the attempts of the union-endorsed board members to shut down discussion, the non-union board members are correct in stating that there has been no benefit, and these programs take a lot of money from other programs that do benefit students and teachers. To understand why they are correct, we don't have to look any further than a research report our local teachers union highlighted in March of last year. I myself discussed this report at a board meeting. After that discussion, one of the officers of the teachers union I had an email exchange that this board was included in. Every board member can see it for themselves if they look in their emails between the dates of April 9th, April 15th of last year. What was discussed both at the board meeting last year and in those emails was that the union study said how great staff feels when mental health programs are announced. However, it also stated that there was zero improvement to behaviors or academic performance for every group. Actually, this study had one group of students with increased misbehavior issues, and that's the best study the union could find. Now, when you do read studies that recorded an improvement, what you find is that the zero improvement results continued until you get the counselor to student ratio down to 1 counselor for every 130 students. Most studies require the ratio to be closer to 1 counselor for every 90 students. Even then, mental health programs do not produce broad-based improvements in behaviors or academics. You have to have a specific goal, such as wanting to increase college enrollment. And the question has to be asked, is the presence of counselors what produced the improvements, or is it the focus from adults that students trust that gets the results? And if there were teachers taking students out of class that frequently to discuss the benefits of a specific goal, would they have the same results? Even if you believe it was the presence of school counselors that produced those results, and even if you believe that only being able to achieve such a narrow result is worth the expense, the hard facts is that of the schools who were able to achieve results, they had to increase their student-facing staff by 20 to 30%, and the money simply does not exist. It's no longer a far-off moment when the spending plans that the union-endorsed politicians keep voting in will overrun our budget. 16 months ago, when the school board staff presented the spending increases that the teachers union has planned, that list of spending increases has been given the title of the blueprint. I stated at that meeting that those spending increases are so large that they will take over our government's budget. That was 16 months ago. 5 months ago, our governor announced that beginning this year, our state will have perpetual budget deficits caused by the planned increases in public school spending. 3 months ago, the state legislature announced its intention that next year it will vote for a 50% increase to the sales tax, the largest tax increase in our history. 3 weeks ago, our governor announced a 60% increase to 338 fees that the state charges, including the vehicle registration fees that have been talked about on social media and the news recently. And 2 weeks ago, our state received a negative credit rating from one of the 3 international organizations that are tasked with raising the alarm if a government begins to lose their ability to pay the bills. Just because the majority of the media will not report on how severe these events are, don't be misled. While this is happening needlessly, until we turn this around, we are in dire straits. What happens now is that money gets taken away from basic services, such as earlier this year when the governor took money out of the road maintenance and community college budgets to add to the public schools, or money gets taken out of everyone's budget through the largest tax and fee increases in our state's history. Our governor and legislature have announced that all of that will be happening repeatedly for the next 9 years. In other words, our governor and our legislature are telling us that our standard of living is going to be diminished as we take away from every other area of children's lives so the school board can have that money. And what our union-free board members' discussion was illustrating, despite the union-endorsed board members' attempts to never discussing it themselves, is that these vastly expensive programs have already failed to benefit children in the school districts that years ago blew out their own budgets doing the same thing. And I've never discussed this in this setting, but I'm actually a volunteer for an organization where we deal with cutting down recidivism, behaviors of violent individuals. And so it has occurred to me over time that really I'm the only person that seems to ever speak to this board that is associated with something regarding improved behaviors. And so there's many reasons why. The reasons it doesn't work isn't a mystery, actually. And I'll actually go to a comment from the teachers union president who stated that things changed 10 years ago. What I'm going to state is the obvious. Kids did not dramatically change 10 years ago. Something else changed 10 years ago. It wasn't the kids. It wasn't the teachers. And it was completely under our control, and it's still under our control. So maybe there'll be an appropriate time to discuss it later, but nothing that has been pointed out is inaccurate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen.
That proves viewpoint discrimination. You got 3 minutes more than I do.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward to speak? Okay, that ends our public comment. Board members, this is a time for response to public comment, should there be any. I'd like to say to our in-person audience and those viewing the broadcast and the live stream, today's public comments included language that is not condoned in an educational setting. However, this individual was exercising his right to free speech. At this time, we'll move to old business. Our first item under old business is an action item, which is the second reading of proposed changes to policy GBED, staff identification. Good evening, Mrs. Ram.
Thank you, President Williams, Dr. Savine, members of the board. The Board of Education approved the first reading of proposed changes to policy GBED at its public business meeting on May 21st, 2024. The policy committee posted a notice on board docs and the school system's website to notify the public of proposed changes and to seek comments from the public on such. The committee did not receive any public comment. The committee is now recommending the Board of Education approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy GBED.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy GBED entitled Staff Identification.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? We'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy GBED entitled Staff Identification. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, we have 6 affirmative and the student member concurs. Next, we have a first reading of proposed changes to policy GCDA, staff employment, transfer, and separation from service and non-discrimination statement, and the proposed rescissions of policy GDPB, resignation, non-certificated certificated employees, and policy GDD, hiring non-certificated personnel. Sorry, I murdered that.
It's okay, there's only 7 more policies after this. The policy committee reviewed policies GCDA, GDPB, and GDD at its public work sessions on April 11th and May 9th, 2024. The committee conducted a review of policy GCDA with the purpose of updating the term certificated personnel to licensed personnel due to changes in state regulations. The committee also reviewed policies GDPB and GDD and determined the content of those policies can be moved to policy GCDA. The committee is now recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy GCDA and the proposed rescissions of policies GDPB and GDD.
Graham, is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy GCDA, staff employment, transfer and separation from service, and non-discrimination statement, and the proposed rescissions of policy GDPB, resignation, non-certificated employees, and policy GDD, hiring non-certificated personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Is there any discussion? Any questions? We'll move to the vote. We're voting on Mr. Stauffer's motion and Dr. Zentmeyer's second to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy GCDA and the proposed rescissions of policy GDPB and policy GDD. All those in favor? 5. And the student member concurs. Thank you. Right. Next, we have the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADD, health and safety, and the proposed rescissions of policy EBD, asbestos, and policy JHCC, communicable diseases, employees, and students.
As the board can see from this policy, the previous one, and the next one, we really are trying to streamline and not have duplicative policies. So again, this policy committee reviewed policies ADD, EBD, and JHCC at its public work session on May 9th, 2024. The committee reviewed policies EBD and JHCC and determined that because both focus on health and safety, they should be combined with policy ADD, which is the Board of Education's overarching policy on health and safety of school facilities. Policy ADD was updated accordingly, and the title was updated to clarify the policy addresses both health and safety of school facilities. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADD and the proposed rescission of policies EBD and JHCC.
Thank you, Mrs. Graham. Is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADD, health and safety, and the proposed rescissions of policy EBD, asbestos, and policy JHCC, communicable diseases, employees, and students.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any questions, any discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. We're voting on Mr. Stauffer's motion and Dr. Zentmeyer's second for the first reading of the proposed changes to policy ADD and the proposed rescission of policy EBD and policy JHCC. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Next up is the first reading of proposed changes to policy EHB, records, retention, and disposition.
The policy committee reviewed policy EHB at its public work session on May 9th, 2024. The purpose of the change recommended by the committee is to allow the superintendent to implement administrative regulation setting forth a record retention schedule. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to EHB.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy EHB, records, retention, and disposition.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? We'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy EHB, records, retention, and disposition. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative. Student member concurs. Motion carries. Next, we have the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCE, providing personal health care services to students.
The Policy Committee reviewed this policy at its public work session on May 9, 2024. The committee recommended the term "public health care services" be defined in the policy and language added to allow the superintendent to implement an administrative regulation to carry out the policy. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCE.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCE, providing personal health care services to students.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? Move to the vote. We're voting to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCE, providing personal health care services to students. All those in favor? Okay, 6, and the student member concurs. Okay, next we have first reading of proposed changes to policy ADF, wellness, physical and nutritional health.
The Policy Committee reviewed policy ADF at its public work session on June 3, 2024. As a result of an audit by an outside agency, staff was informed the policy must include language stating the Board of Education will inform the public of the policy annually, and any changes will be posted publicly. I would like to note to the board and those listening, and we do already do such, but it wasn't stated specifically in the policy. Proposed paragraph C meets this requirement. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADF.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADF, wellness, physical and nutritional health.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any questions, any discussion? Move to the vote. We're voting to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy ADF, wellness, physical, and nutritional health. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative, and the student member concurs. The motion carries. Next, first reading of proposed changes to policy BCAA, organization, number, composition.
The Policy Committee reviewed policy BCAA at its public work session on June 3, 2024. The committee agreed with staff's recommendation to rescind the policy because the number of Board of Education members is set forth in state law, and there is a separate board policy on the student member. The committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading to rescind policy BCAA.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading to rescind policy BCAA organization, number, and composition.
Thank you, Mrs. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? Mr. Gessert?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions here. With this, it says that it's set in state law. Is every school board have 7 members?
No, they do not.
Okay. So do they also have separate policies on the student?
Well, okay, so let me back up a bit. So in Maryland statutes, every school board has a section that talks about how many board members they need to have and who makes up those board members and how they become a board member. And then some boards of education have state law that articulate the requirements for the student member. Some have policy on it, and some don't speak to it at all because not every Board of Ed has a student member.
So what happens, and this is hypothetically, what happens if the state says all boards across the state of Maryland have to have this many, and it has to be elected student? Do we lose our right if the state comes in and says that?
Correct. So if the state law were to change, although that's very hypothetical because there'd be a lot of very loud voices at the legislature, but if state law changed, essentially eliminate the individual school board rights and set one blanket law, regardless if we had a policy or not, we'd have to follow that.
So whenever we talk about negotiations and we don't want to lose wording, because once you lose it, you can hardly ever get it put back in. Why would we want to lose this when it works for us?
Well, much like negotiations, there is language within contracts that say if there's an article or clause within this negotiated language that it becomes invalid by operation of law, that language becomes invalid. So even if we kept this and state law changed, essentially that policy would be invalid.
Could you sue for that on grounds of this was our policy? We've had,
I mean, the reality is you could sue for anything. You would have to actually bring a constitutional challenge against the law that was passed.
because I hate to lose wording, especially when it's something that the citizens of Washington County have already spoken on. And then we're going to go in here, we're just kind of relinquishing that back to the state if they choose, without having the citizens to have a say.
And Mr. Gusford, I appreciate that, and I also want to kind of send a thank you to our delegation. Because of our loud voice as a Board of Ed, they made changes to that law on our behalf and at our request. So I think it would take a number of elected officials to change that area of the law, and our delegation has been a strong supporter of our request to keep what we have and to make changes. So it really could go either way. We were just, as a policy committee, discussing if it already exists in state law, then why would we want to be duplicative?
And as we all know, the delegations of any area can change quickly. And I would hope that, we wouldn't lose the footing that we have, because as you can see in the state of Maryland, we typically in Washington County don't have much to say. And it's nice to have some things, and I hate to give up, anything, let alone this.
And Mr. Gusford, I don't know how the vote will turn out, but I can assure you, knowing the 180 days we have in the legislative session, should a bill be introduced, and given our cycle of policy and review and comment, we could potentially, I think likely, should the board vote to rescind, to then vote to add a policy that puts it back in place. As this last session, we have watched bills, and we're very active. So if something like that were to come up, I imagine there'd be a staff recommendation, should this be rescinded, to probably put something in language and advocate against it. So we have options.
Why would we want to change it then if you would want to advocate to have it back in?
I'm just saying, if you're concerned about that, we could do that.
And I think that's the reason I won't be voting for this one. I mean, I'm just probably one of the only ones that will vote for it, but
So,
thank you.
He does bring up a question for me, though. When we talked about this in policy, it made sense. We have this discussed elsewhere, but at second glance, we don't say anywhere else that we're composed of 7 elected members and a non-voting student rep. And he made me think of a question. How do we determine how many board members we have, and if it's not written in state law, how is it determined how many board members we have? And
Mr. Evans, it is in state law, so.
I'm sorry, I thought you said it wasn't.
No,
Oh, okay.
we do. So where it says, we do have another policy that speaks specifically to a non-voting student representative. So that is covered in a separate policy. This policy that we enacted back in 1974 is the same time the law talked about how many board members we have to have. So this policy is mirrored after what the requirement of state law is.
So it wouldn't hurt just to leave it alone.
No, there's no harm in it.
It's interesting that we're having this discussion. As I was sitting in closed session and looking at the pictures on the wall, there was a time when this board was 5 members, and then it became 7. So it'd be interesting to know, what happened that the delegation decided to make the change from 5 to 7, and realizing that in some counties, the board members are elected by districts. They represent specific areas. We don't have our county divided into districts, but we do have municipalities. So It's a very interesting discussion to
And I certainly can
have.
provide to the board the legislative history of when the changes in the composition and makeup of the board occurred.
Any other discussion, any questions?
Yep, I'll just say that I do kind of agree with Mike. I mean, it made sense, it seemed harmless enough to rescind it, but what does it hurt having it there, and what does it gain by not having it there? So I think that does make sense. Sorry.
So, any other questions or further discussion? We'll move to the vote. Okay, we're voting to approve the first reading to rescind policy BCAA, organization, number, composition. All those in favor of the rescission? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 2. A student member was with the affirmative. Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, next we have the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF, epinephrine availability and use requirements.
The Policy Committee reviewed policy GHCF at its public work session on June 3rd, 2024, because of a bill enacted during the recent Maryland legislative session that takes effect July 1. The new law requires local boards of education obtain and store bronchial dilators in schools for use in emergency situations, the inhaler, if you will. The requirements of this new state law are very similar to what we already have in the policy for the use of EpiPens, and the committee is recommending the Board of Education approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF.
Okay, Ms. Lamb, is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, epinephrine availability and use requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any discussion, any questions? All right, we'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JHCF. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative. Student member concurs. So that is the end of our policy action. And next, we have consideration of student eligibility waiver for interscholastic athletics at the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts. And we have Mrs. Ram, who will be remaining with us. And we have Mr. Eric Michael, our Supervisor of Health, Physical Education, and Athletics. Good evening.
In the last legislative session, most recent session, I should say, House Bill 971, Washington County Interscholastic Athletics Student Eligibility Waiver and School Classification was enacted. The new law, which becomes effective July 1st, 2024, authorizes the Board of Education, just for Washington County, to waive a certain specific eligibility requirement for participation in interscholastic athletics at certain schools for students who attend Barbara Ingram School for the Arts. The Board of Education's approval of the eligibility waiver will allow a BISFA student to participate in interscholastic athletics at the student's zoned high school, provided all other eligibility requirements are met.
Okay, Mrs. Ram, is there a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the student eligibility waiver for interscholastic athletics at Barbara Ingram School for the Arts for the 2024-2025 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Any questions, any discussion?
So as this is labeled just 2024, 2025, is this going to be a continuous, because I haven't read the actual legislation that went through, is this just going to be a continuous thing that we renew on an annual basis?
That's correct, Mr. Snyder. It's listed as an annual waiver,
Okay.
so it will be something brought before the board every year.
Great, thank you.
Anything further by way of discussion, question? We'll move to the vote. We're voting to approve the student eligibility waiver for interscholastic athletics at the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts for the 2024-2025 school year. All those in favor, please. Okay, we have 6 affirmative. Student member concurs. Thank you, Dennis. Next item for consideration is this evening's consent agenda, and we have our Supervisor of Purchasing, Mr. Scott Bakewell, presenting. Good evening.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Sovine. Tonight I have 10 items for your review. These items have been reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bakewell. Is there a motion, please?
President Williams, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for Board Certified Behavior Analysts renewed to Maryland Behavioral Consulting, DBA Applied ABC at the unit price listed. Zonar GPS System, renewal to Zonar Systems Incorporated at a cost of $64,610.35. Produce, renewal to Seashore Fruit and Produce Company Incorporated, Greensburg Farm Warehouse and Reinhardt Orchards at the unit price listed. Warehouse and delivery services for food and nutrition services, renewal to Acela Distribution and Warehousing, LLC, Acela Worldwide Solutions Incorporated at the unit price listed. Heating oil supply and delivery, renewal to AC&T Company Incorporated at the unit prices listed. Athletic trainer services, renewal to Meritus Medical Center at an approximate cost of $463,636.60. Juniper Service Support and Licensing to Skyline Technology Solutions at a cost of $84,578. Kitchen smallwares and small equipment to Cooks Direct Incorporated at a cost of $8,396.96. Johnny's Incorporated at a cost of $12,608.83. MTS Equipment Incorporated at a cost of $28,023.75. And Samtel and Son Incorporated at a cost of $37,130.63. Summer Extended Learning Programs to YMCA of Hagerstown, Maryland Incorporated at an approximate cost of $108,995.64, and Boys and Girls Club of Washington County at an approximate cost of $15,575.44. Theatrical rigging and architectural lighting inspection, maintenance, and repair service to Barbizon Lighting Capital Incorporated, Par Lights Concert Lighting Incorporated, and Stage Rigging Services Incorporated at the unit prices listed.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any questions, any discussion?
I have a question, just to check my math out. So how much does it cost us for, I know we have the hourly rate. How much does it cost us for 1 year of a BCBA at Bester?
Well, that depends. I mean,
Say
at
40 hours a
40
week.
hours a week at $140. I didn't do the math, but yeah. But that's a unit price, so it may or may not be that service is required for the 40 hours a week. It may be 35, 30. It really depends on.
But if it were, it would be $224,000 a year?
180 days. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we're voting on Mrs. Murray's motion. Mr. Stauffer's second to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements as presented by Mrs. Murray. All those in favor? 2, 3. So the consent agenda this evening will fail for lack of 4 votes. We have 3 in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Bakewell.
All right. Thank you.
This time we'll move to our next agenda item, which is the 2024 Educational Facilities Master Plan with Mr. Rollins and Mr. Criswell presenting. Good evening, gentlemen.
President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Spine. 2 weeks ago, the 2024 Educational Facilities Master Plan was presented to the board at its work session. The plan will be used as the basis for the 6 projects. Well, in your package, hopefully there they are, on the screen. In the upcoming FY 2026 state and local capital funding requests. After the work session, the plan was presented to the Facilities and Enrollment Advisory Committee, which has indicated its concurrence with the plan. And tonight we're here to seek approval so that it can be submitted to the State Interagency Commission on School Construction and the Maryland Department of Planning for review and approval. And we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Is there a motion, please?
Yes, I make the motion to approve the 2024 Educational Facilities Master Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zettmeyer. Any questions or any discussion?
I just want to say, I think you guys do a heck of a job taking care of the schools and so forth. And, you know, I trust your judgment on a lot of these things. I don't think I'm qualified to second guess you.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Anything else? Okay, we're voting on Mr. Gessert's motion, Dr. Zettmeyer's second, to approve the 2024 Educational Facilities Master Plan. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmatives. Student member concurs, so the motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Savine, we'll have the rest of your superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, President Williams, members of the board. We're approaching the final stretch of our strategic planning process, and we're really starting to see more specifics take shape. And at this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Jennifer Webster, our Associate Superintendent for Leadership and Administration, to share some additional update before bringing the final draft to this board for approval next month. Before I turn it over to her, I just want to take this moment to reference, this plan is all about serving our students, and I want to lift up our students because in our focus groups, we led with our student voice, and I just want to extend my appreciation, Mr. Snyder, to your fellow classmates and students for demonstrating in a very respectful, civil manner how you can share different perspectives in a group that may have varying opinions. And I just think that as an adult, we can learn from our students. And I want to thank you for your leadership and the student council leaders that I have the privilege of seeing them do governmental work and engaging in meaningful debate and providing various opinions, once again, in a very civil and respectful manner. And I thank you for what you do in terms of building a strong community here in Washington County. And this strategic plan is all about that, supporting the needs of our students and building a stronger community. Dr. Webster.
Thank you. Good evening again, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Savine. Just to echo your comments, Dr. Savine, it's very exciting to see our strategic plan coming together because the voice of our students and staff and community members is very apparent in the details that I'm going to share with you today as you said it starts to take shape. So first of all, I do want to kind of backtrack a little bit and just remind you that a few weeks ago I shared with you that our amazing 50-member design team was set to meet on June 7th to review the draft goals, objectives, and strategies for the strategic plan. And we did meet on June 7th, and then the steering committee met on June 10th, and throughout that week, we worked furiously to incorporate a lot of feedback that we received from our association partners and from our business community and from our design team on a busy day on June 7th. So we have revised the goals, objectives, and strategies, and I'm looking forward to sharing our progress with you. So as a reminder, our revised vision, mission, and core values are on the screen. We were thoughtful in the creation of our goals that I'll talk more about in a moment to be sure that those goals, objectives, and strategies are going to help us realize our vision. And as you can see on the screen, that's really working toward ensuring that all of our spaces are cultivating learning communities that spark curiosity, ignite creativity, and inspire success. I shared last meeting as well that our design team identified 4 priority areas for our strategic plan, and you see those here on the screen. We've made minor tweaks to the goals that I shared a couple of weeks ago, specifically changing in the student success priority area from preparing students with the skills, knowledge, and habits to maximize their full potential. We revised that to be maximize student success. And in the community engagement priority area, I think Dr. Zentmeyer, you pointed this out last meeting, and the feedback we received on June 7th echoed that feedback. So we've added caregivers to the statement that WCPS will partner with the community so that it now reads, partner with caregivers and the community. So our design team has identified objectives and strategies to promote these goals. So keeping in mind, see, I live and breathe this, so I'm going to try to I use the terms very easily, but you start to follow the through line here. So these 4 priority areas and these goals, we developed objectives and strategies to help us achieve these 4 goals. And so that is what I'm going to share with you now. So as we look, I'm going to take you through each of the priority areas and just a high-level discussion of the objectives for each of those priority areas. It's important, I think, to note that as we start to build out the metrics for measuring these goals, we're thoughtful that we need to really take time to look at the baseline data. And as we build out we will have a data dashboard that will allow the community and our staff to follow our progress over time. We will build out the details of the metrics as we go. We have some ideas on some of them of what specifically we're looking for in terms of improvement, but we know that we also need to be thoughtful about setting goals that make sense. So I'm going to take you through each area. The first area in student success, you'll see that the objectives, and the idea here is that each of these objectives, our goal is to improve or continue to improve in those areas in order to meet our goal of student success. And when you look at student success, you can see that we're focused on the earliest experience we have with our students. Then we're looking at where our students finish. We're looking at support for students as they move through the grades whenever there are gaps. And we're looking at the whole child and their involvement in their school community. So breaking down the objectives in student success, the first objective is to continue to improve our kindergarten readiness as measured by the kindergarten readiness assessment. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not going to say certain percentages yet because we will build those out as we build the data dashboard to look at our current progress and then where we want to be. And the idea is it's a 5-year plan, and then we would have incremental targets within each of those. But we know that kindergarten readiness is a point we want to leverage to achieve our goal of student success. The next objective is to increase the rate of students on track for meeting college and career readiness standards, or CCR, as we call them, in ELA, English Language Arts, and math. The next one is that we will effectively use intervention and support structures to increase the number of K-12 students who are meeting grade level expectations in core literacy and math. That's really leaning in on our supplemental instruction models, our monitoring of intervention plans for students who are not on grade level, really honing and refining the work that we've already begun in this area. And our fourth objective is to increase student engagement at each school. We know that a sense of belonging and connectivity to the school community is important in academic growth. So our fourth objective is to increase involvement in and participation in academic clubs, sports, other clubs, organizations, cultural activities, arts programs, and extracurriculars. Moving to access and opportunity with this priority area, you'll see that here again we start with our earliest experience with students. We also then move to how they finish high school with us. our support for their movement through the system, and lastly, thinking about those competencies I mentioned the last few board meetings about the competencies of a portrait of a graduate, those skills that we want to be developing throughout their pre-K to 12 experience with us. So in the first priority area of access and opportunity, we want to start with our objective to increase our pre-kindergarten enrollment for 3 and 4-year-olds. We've seen the impact of pre-K on our student achievement and kindergarten readiness, and we want to continue to expand the number of students who we are able to reach. The second objective here is to ensure all of our graduating students complete rigorous and relevant coursework in CTE, AP, IB, and/or dual enrollment. So the idea of college and career readiness and looking at pathways that students access, ensuring that every student touches one of those pathways, if not more, so that their experience is rigorous with us. Our third objective is that all schools will develop a comprehensive transition plan to support students in those key transition years from pre-K to K, 5th to 6th, and 8th to 9th grade. We know those are key times whenever making sure students are successful in those grades and have a smooth transition is important to their ability to access a strong, rigorous education with us. And finally, our fourth objective is that the portrait of a graduate competencies that we shared with you the last few meetings be intentionally incorporated into our curriculum so students experience those competencies and we learn around those pre-K to 12. Now, in the priority area of culture, safety, and wellness, you'll see here that these measures, these objectives really center around perceptual data, how students feel, how our families feel, and their feeling about safety, culture, and climate, our students coming to school, and then staff recruitment and retention, how our staff are feeling connected. So specifically, the first two objectives in this area focus on perceptual data from staff, students in the community, so that we can continue to improve upon, well, first establish a baseline we do have the Maryland survey, climate survey, but we would like to really develop a district-wide survey that allows us to assess from stakeholders, both in school and their caretakers or caregivers, how they are feeling about safety and well-being, school climate and culture, and continue to improve upon the feedback that they're giving us. The next objective is to increase student attendance, thus reducing chronic absenteeism. And the last objective in this area is to improve the retention of our supporting staff, our teachers, and our leaders. And with each one of these, I'm going through just saying the objectives. Our design team also gave input on and helped us develop specific strategies that when we start to operationalize and report out on how we are operationalizing our work around each of these goals, we'll be sharing, okay, so what are you doing to support staff retention and each of these objectives. And the fourth priority area of community engagement, the first, when we look at these areas, these really focus on improving our connections with families, community partners, and our overall communication and transparency with the community. The first priority area of community engagement, the objective is to define family engagement by level, measure our engagement of families by school, and then continue to improve upon that number. The next objective is to increase the number of district collaborative partnerships with local businesses and organizations. And the last is to enhance our transparency and communication structures. And the way we would look to measure that one is by continuous improvement in relevant questions on the climate survey that I referenced. So, and I'm happy to take your questions about the information I've shared thus far. Between now and the July meeting, our team will be finalizing a summary, an overall summary of the strategic plan for your approval, and we'll also begin the internal work of aligning our central office and school-based leadership priorities to ensure the elevation of the work that I have described in these objectives. And I look forward to bringing a summary of the strategic plan to our July board meeting for your approval. Dr. Svein?
I just want to thank Dr. Webster for her leadership, as well as our senior leadership team. I also want to reference, since the last time we met, just last week, had the privilege of meeting with nearly 20 of our executive business leaders that received a similar briefing that the board has now received on 3 separate occasions. We received overwhelming support of our business community. Actually, we had a couple business leaders that were on vacation last week, and first thing in the morning, we're going to do a special session for them. But I want to thank our business community for their level of engagement and support of this strategic plan as well.
Any questions, colleagues? Thank you, Dr. Webster.
Thank you all.
We'll have the superintendent's update. Dr. Savine?
President Williams, that concludes my update, but I do want to just raise one item for the board to consider. Respecting the decision of the board regarding consent agenda, there is one item that may be a benefit for the board to consider. Item 9, which is summer extended learning programs. With not approving the consent agenda, this agenda item in particular would prevent us from providing these services that are scheduled to be administered on July 1. So I just offer that for consideration. If it is the desire of the board to revisit that one item, I would invite our chief legal counsel, Mrs. Ram, forward to assist the board with that process. But I believe it is something that is worth considering. As I mentioned, those services are scheduled to start July 1. Our next meeting is not scheduled until July the 16th.
Mrs. Williams, I'd like to amend the agenda then to add item number 9, the summer extended learning programs, for a specific vote in the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Dr. Gessford's motion. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, we're voting to amend.
Pardon me, President Williams. For point of clarification, we're moving to amend new business. Just wanted that in the minutes, so it's new business.
Okay, Mr. Gessford, so your motion is to amend the agenda under new business to include
Number 9.
item
summer-
9 from this evening's
Right.
consent agenda.
Summer extended learning programs.
And Dr. Zetmeyer, you're fine with that, with the second?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Okay, we have 6 affirmative. So we have an amended agenda. So at this time, we're past new business, but we'll go back to new business. Is there a motion someone would like to make regarding the summer extended learning programs?
I move that we approve the summer extended learning programs for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any discussion? Any questions? All those in favor of approving item 9, summer extended learning programs? All those in favor? 6 affirmative, student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to personnel action for this evening. Dr. Webster?
Good evening again. Sorry about that. As discussed earlier, during closed session, there are several staff changes for your review. At this time, I ask for your approval of this evening's personnel actions.
Thank you. Is there a motion, please?
I move to approve the personnel actions dated Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, as presented in closed session.
Thank you, discussion? We're voting to approve the personnel actions dated Tuesday, June 18th, as presented in closed session. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative. Those personnel actions are approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
This time we'll have reports to the board. We'll have board member committee reports. Mr. Snyder, do you have anything from student government?
Actually, I was just looking on my phone to see what the latest news was with the state. The Maryland Association of Student Council's officers for the 2024-2025 school year met with Congressman Hoyer and outlined initiatives for student civic engagement. Additionally, the week after, the Maryland Youth Advisory Council met with a number of legislators. Sorry, it's 4 a.m. where I just came back from vacation, so I'm trying to fight the jet lag, and discuss a number of upcoming initiatives, and that is all.
Okay, Mr. Snyder. Curriculum Instruction Committee, Dr. Zentmeyer?
We'll meet again August 13th at 11:30.
Thank you. Facilities Committee, Mr. Gaspard?
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Most of our time was spent on the 2024 Educational Facility Master Plan, and you heard that presentation tonight.
That's it?
Yep.
Thank you. Finance Committee, Mr. Bickford isn't here. Human Resources Committee, Mrs. Murray? I have nothing. Thank you. Policy Review and Development Committee?
Policy Committee will meet June 26th at 3 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Okay, that concludes our committee reports. Under miscellaneous business, per usual, we have a list of future agenda items. Our next meeting on July 16th. We have a number of second readings of policy and a few first readings. So it looks like we'll have a repeat of what we had this evening with quite a few policies. We'll also be considering the adoption of our strategic plan on that date, and we'll be looking at the design development documents for the Downsville Pike Elementary School. So that's all happening on July 16th. Okay, at this time we'll have board member comments. Dr. Zentmeyer, would you like to begin?
No, I can go last.
Okay. Mr. Snyder?
Okay, Graham, you get to go last
It's
because this is your time. Okay, almost a century ago, 1928, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to make a transatlantic trip. Actually, she was the second person to make the transatlantic trip. 4 years later, she also became the first woman to pilot nonstop across the Atlantic, and the second person. One of our newer CTE programs will allow our students to work in that area, and they'll even build a plane this fall at Williamsport. Yep, for our students in Washington County, the sky is the limit. Mr. Evans?
I got nothing.
Thank you. I want to say congratulations to our team in the back who are here every meeting, who work hard for our students, for our staff. We appreciate you more than you know. I also would like to thank our teachers who are hopefully starting to get a little rest, getting a little break. As I think about our other staff that are still here, we have custodians that will be working the grounds, fixing and maintaining and doing hard work. I know I have a few neighbors that I see going for their 10 hours and they come home and go straight to bed because they're tired. So I'm sure that they're all working very hard to get us ready for next year. And along with our kitchen staffs who have maintained food throughout the year for our students and have fed them. And then they still work. Some of them are still working with the meal machines throughout Washington County to continue to feed students of need. And so I think it's up to 18 years old. You can still go and get a free meal, and I would encourage folks to do that. But thank you to all of our staff, wide and narrow areas that they perform all the time, so especially in the heat. So I thank them for doing that, and I don't have to be out there today.
Thank you, Mr. Gessler. Vice President Stauffer?
I'll reserve comments later time.
Mrs. Murray?
Everybody knows how much I enjoy visiting Marshall Street School, and I've made some friends there. And one of the students that we heard about tonight from April Crowhair was her son Charlie, and he's like an adopted grandson to me, along with his brother Matthew. And the staff made this calendar, and this is Charlie's calendar, and every month there's a different picture of Charlie. The staff put so much time and effort into this. I appreciate it so much. And I want to thank them for sending me a copy. I know they gave one to all of the parents, but I want to thank them because this is really special to me.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. I have no comments this evening.
Graham.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He wanted to go last.
Yeah,
Is this not
You're right,
last?
you're right. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to forget. I'm sorry.
No, it's
And I spoke out of turn.
No, no.
happened.
Just
It's-
keep
hey,
me
it's
straight.
happened.
Graham, final word.
Final word, final meeting, which is really sad. I'm incredibly thankful to the Board of Ed for providing me this opportunity and for looking over my education for the last 9 years that I've been in Washington County. I was joking with President Williams before the meeting that I'm no longer the student member on the board because I'm no longer a student of Washington County. I graduated 2 weeks ago. I've truly been given an incredible opportunity by Washington County, and I'm so thankful. As Dr. Webster mentioned, which is a perfect segue, chronic absenteeism. The senior year of high school, I had between 40 and 50 attendance instances, which were all excused because I was here. I was the most absent person. I was one of the most absent people in my high school class, I believe, and I would not have changed a thing. This role has really provided me such insight and such incredible opportunities to get to meet people from across the county, across the state, at conferences like MAVE, gotten me involved, and truly changed my life. I would encourage any educator listening, any student watching, to push either yourself or push a student that you know to take the next step, because I was never a student involved in student government. I was never engaged like that in my community. And my friend saw something in me, and she told me about this position, and then the advisor saw something in me, and he told me to run, and he gave me this opportunity. And it has truly transformed my life. So I just wanted to say thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Spine, do you have any final comments before we adjourn?
Mr. Graham, final words. So I'll say thank you, but I want to extend you just an additional privilege of any additional comments, parting words you may want to share.
Thank you. Two things. The first is that the greatest moments of my term as a student member were, oh wow, my nose is running. That's a cold, I'm not crying. Were when I was in schools. I visited 12, 13 schools during my time as a student member. I really wanted to do more, but I would just highly encourage any board members when they're available, any staff. I know that you guys are working around the clock, and I really am appreciative of that. But being in a school and experiencing it for yourself and being with students and building those connections is really the most meaningful thing, I think. So I just wanted to extend that. And second, when my advisor for student council asked me how I felt before my last student council event, I said sad but proud, and I think I can echo that now. I know that my seat is going to be filled by a very incredibly bright and capable individual, Daphne Wang, and I can't wait to see what she does with this position. So thank you, guys.
We'll miss you, Graham. We'll miss you. Colleagues, anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.